So your garbage disposal is acting up. That can be very annoying, there's no doubt. But let's start in the discussion of the garbage disposal by seeing if you need a new one or if it's something that can be repaired. Now, if your garbage disposal is making a horrendous noise, things are loose and shaking around and it's just utter craziness, then it's pretty safe to assume it just needs to be replaced. The teeth and blades on the inside will wear out over time, and as they wear, they get looser and looser. Occasionally, you'll lose a rivet or an attachment of some kind, and it'll go crazy in there. And just replacing it is not only the best way to go, but the safest way to go. Other times, maybe your motor is froze up. You flip the switch and nothing happens. You can hear it hum, but nothing happens. Now, if you can hear it hum, that means it's getting electricity, so that part's okay. But it's obviously not spinning. And the easiest way to make sure that it's not something that can be repaired is to flip the switch to turn the power back off. And then, using one of these tools right here, this is a garbage disposal key, if you will. Now, between you and me, it's a fairly generic hex key that if you have a set of hex keys, you probably have one this size. But this tool is perfect. It comes with most garbage disposals, not the least expensive models or the least powerful models, but the standard models come with this so that you've got one handy. You might consider taping it to the garbage disposal, but certainly leaving it under the sink near the garbage disposal where you have access to it. The reason why you'll need it is twofold. One, you can use it to release the garbage disposal by turning the flange up here. But the aspect we're talking about right now is if your motor is seized up, you can hear it hum when the power's on. You've turned the power back off. This key can be inserted right in the bottom, and I'll show that to you again in just a moment. In the very center of the bottom is a hole where that key can be inserted, and you can just continue rotating it back and forth until you get it broken loose. Now, sometimes it takes a little bit of force for that first bit of movement, and then you might find that you need to make sure there's nothing inside it at that point. But a lot of times it just gets a type of food in there that just wants to clog around the outside edges of the motor, and it'll restrict its movement. Many, many times I have walked into a home when a client called and said, my garbage disposal is not working. I flipped the switch, heard it hum, turned the switch back off, reached under with a garbage disposal key, turned it loose, flipped the switch again, had it work great, ran some water down it, out the door. Now, between you and me, I don't charge for something like that. But plumbers have a minimum charge. So this key might save you an $80 minimum charge. You never know. The other thing that can be an issue is when you flip the switch, nothing. You don't hear a hum or anything. Chances are there's no power. If there's no reason to think that the power for the whole house is off or that circuit breaker might be popped, there is a small GFI reset button on the bottom of these that I'll also show you once we have it out on the table that allows you to reset it. It operates as a basic shock safety. So if the motor shorts out somehow, that it won't shock you if you touch it or operate it. So there have been times where I've gotten a call, hey, my garbage disposal is not working. I show up at their house, I walk in, I flip the switch, I don't hear a hum or anything. I turn the switch back off, I reach underneath, push a little reset button, flip the switch, garbage disposal's perfect, I'm out the door. Between you and me, I don't charge for that. I'm hoping they'll call me when they want to build a new house. But the average plumber has a minimum charge. He's got a trip charge. He's thinking of his fuel charges and that sort of thing. So it's possible that checking that reset button on the bottom might save you that $80 as well. Now, the next thing we're going to do to remove this garbage disposal, to get ready for the new one to be in place, is to remove these two bolts that secure the flange that attach it to the drain. You'll also need to remove a hose clamp up here if you've got a dishwasher connection at this point as well. But we are going to deal with this flange. For the sake of the demonstration, we don't have a dishwasher in place. You're just going to loosen these nuts. And I've got to warn you that after time, sometimes these nuts are really tight and a normal screwdriver just doesn't cut it. In that case, you'll want to get a socket and a ratchet on that to get them broken loose. You'll need to obviously completely remove them to separate that flange. At that point, you can usually push it out far enough that you'll be able to get the garbage disposal clear. Now I'm going to insert the key up here at the top of the flange. And I'm basically just going to turn it counterclockwise to allow it to break free. Just remember that these are rather heavy and there might be some liquid debris in it that is going to dump everywhere. Now, we've put a little extra electrical line on this so I can get it out here on the table to show you what's going on. But yours will not have that much, so you'll just be laying it right down on the bottom of the cabinet to make this disconnection. Now, hopefully before you ever started, you made sure that your switch was off. And if the switch is under the sink, which happens occasionally, they usually put it up near the door though, if it's a installation after the fact and they don't want to have to try and run wires up into the wall. Make sure that switch is off. If it's up on the wall somewhere, I not only make sure it's off, but I'll run a piece of electrical tape over it, just taping it to the cover so that anyone that might walk along knows not to touch that. Using a volt tick such as this, you just compress the clip and you can check it to make sure it's not hot because it will sense voltage through the insulation. And once you're sure that it's safe and that there's no chance the switch can be flipped on while you're working on it, then we're going to switch bits here. We're going to remove the access cover to the electrical area here and get the wiring disconnected. We can do that, like I said, with a Phillips head on this screw. We're going to loosen it enough to get the access door off. And then you're going to find a black wire, a white wire, and a ground wire on the inside. To remove these nuts, obviously all you do is unscrew them. And then you'll need to separate the wires, which can be tricky if they were installed properly because they're usually all twisted up on each other. There's that one. And there's that one. Now, that ground screw will need to be loosened right there so that we can get that ground wire off of there. It's commonly just a Phillips head screw. It might be a standard. It depends on how old your garbage disposal is. You don't have to take it all the way out. Just loosen it enough to get that ground wire off from around it. Now, we'll want to loosen the screws on this clamp right here so that we can get the wires back out to be ready for the new garbage disposal. Oh, while I'm doing this, you'll notice the hole that the garbage disposal key goes in. Can you get that? That garbage disposal key goes right in there to turn that. And here is your reset button for the electrical as well. Ah! We'll get this clamp loose enough that we can get these wires out of it. If your old garbage disposal doesn't have a clamp here, then you're already done. You will have pulled the wires through. But make sure you put a clamp on the new one. You want to hold these wires still so that the round edges of the hole it goes through don't cut through the insulation and eventually create a short. Almost done here. Now, while you're pushing the wires down, you can usually work them out. You've got the wires out, you've got the drain disconnected, you've got the old garbage disposal in your hands, it's ready for the trash heap, and your area is all prepped and ready for you to get the new garbage disposal ready and install. Duh. The first thing we want to do is prep the garbage disposal itself. The first thing I want to mention before I forget, because for today's installation we're not going to do this, but if you have a dishwasher, you will need to use this line if your existing garbage disposal had the dishwasher connected directly to it. If it did, keep in mind that there's a plug in there that keeps it sealed up. And if you need to use this, you'll need to tap that plug out with maybe a Phillips screwdriver and a hammer. It doesn't really take a lot of force, but a decent whack, you'll smack that small round piece loose, and then you'll need to get it out from the inside to make sure it's not in there causing a problem. Now, once that's taken care of, that first step of prep, the next thing we want to do is get the electrical ready. The electrical is going to go right in this hole right here. Our wires are going to go in there. So we're going to loosen the screw that holds the access cover in place. Move that out of the way. And inside you will find a white wire, a black wire, and a green grounding screw. All three of those need to be used in order for this to be a successful installation. Don't skip the ground. Do not skip the ground. Now we've put a little extra wire on this for the sake of the demonstration, so yours is not going to be that long. It will not be that convenient. But I normally lay it down in the base cabinet right there where I'm going to be doing it and then install the electrical rather than putting the electrical in while it's already hanging. Mostly because it's difficult to see inside there. It's tough to work in there once it's already installed and in place. Now, to hold that wire in place, you'll need something like this. This clamp right here will squeeze the Romex, the wire, and hold it in place as it passes through this opening in the garbage disposal. They're very cheap and obviously available in the electrical department. Sometimes they'll be hanging in a little baggie by the garbage disposals, but it essentially just screws on. The hole that it goes into is actually flanged to let it screw in. Super convenient. It's still funny, you'd be surprised how often I find garbage disposals that do not have a clamp on them and the wire is just hanging loose. It's obviously very dangerous because the edge of that hole will eventually work its way through the insulation and it could cause a short of some kind that could shock somebody or even start a fire. So we always want to try and do things properly right from the start. Now we're going to insert the wire into the nut. I usually give them a little bit of a curve so that they come back out where I can find them. See if I can get it to cooperate today. All right. Now we've got plenty of wire in there, and at this point you'll want to tighten that clamp with a Phillips screwdriver to hold the Romex still for the rest of the installation. You guys see that okay? All right. We're going to be grinding food in no time. You watch. And once this clamp is tight, you're ready to get these wires tied together the way they need to be. The first wire I'm going to attach is the ground wire. It really just needs to make a loop around that ground screw. We always run wires clockwise so that as you tighten the screw in place, it will hold it in. Now with the Phillips screwdriver, I can get that tight. Almost there. There we go. Now with a couple of wire nuts, we can get this electrical taken care of. I don't really have a preference which one happens first. I can't really think of a solid reason why it would matter. We're just going to hold the two ends even. We're going to insert the wire nut and twist and twist and twist. You're going to keep going until it gets difficult, and then you'll notice it begins to twist the wires like so. That's when you know you've got it good and tight. Tuck that wire down in there. And we'll move to the black. We'll do the same thing, holding the wires so the ends are even. Slide on the wire nut. And continue spinning until it begins twisting the wires. Like so. That's good and tight. We don't have to worry about that working its way loose. At this point, I'm going to put the cover back in place by sliding it under its mounting screw and making sure it's aligned within the notches. Tighten this attachment, this cover. Then you are pretty much ready to install it. Now let's talk about this flange for just a minute. This mounting flange, it's the old one. We can reuse it because we've got the same sort of mounting system. The vast majority of garbage disposals have now gone to a more universal type of mount. So unless you have a leak up here around where it meets the sink or something of that nature, then you can just leave it in place. If you need to replace it, follow the instructions that come with your garbage disposal, because all of their flanges are slightly different for the ones that are different than these. Just follow the instructions and you'll be good to go from there. But this one is just going to go up. We're going to make sure all three of these tabs lock onto the ring. We're going to use the dishwasher hex key, the garbage disposal hex key, and we can use that in the hole to turn the flange. Okay. Installation is really just as simple as sliding it up, aligning the tabs so that they'll grab the existing flange. You only have to spin them a little bit. Make sure all three of them are up on the top tab, and then you can use the hex key tool to get them on nice and tight. Now, if you're having a problem getting the new garbage disposal slid up into the existing mount, you might want to consider using some plumber's grease, or at the very least maybe get it wet. Even some plumbers will use Vaseline or something of that nature around the perimeter of the lip of the garbage disposal to make it easier to slide into the existing flange. Now, the last part of this installation is to install how it ties into the drain system. Your new garbage disposal will come with a rubber ring like this that gets placed right up against the garbage disposal. I'm going to turn it so it's a little easier for you guys to see. It's going to sit right in here. And contrary to popular belief, it does not go on the pipe. The only thing that goes on the pipe is the collar. Your new garbage disposal will come with a new collar, or you can leave the old one on usually, as long as it's the same bolt pattern and it's doing a fine job. It's not one of those wear out items. Now, assuming that your rest of your drain system is in place, basically this outer flange is going to press against the collar on the drain pipe. It's going to press it into the rubber and allow it to seal effectively. You're simply going to press it into place like so. Get the bolts started, and you can either use a socket to tighten these, or a standard blade screwdriver, which is what we're going to use right there. And we're going to tighten these until they stop. It will compress the rubber effectively, and you can be pretty darn sure of a leak-free installation. And once these are in and tight, you can see, obviously, we've removed the rest of the drain system to make this part easy to see and observe. But at this point, you would need to install the other components of the drain system that you needed to remove earlier in order to get this piece loose. Once those are fully seated, you can align it with the drain system and reinstall the other components you need to make sure it's tied in. At that point, you're good to go. Run the water for a short period of time, long enough to make sure there's no leaks in your drain system in any of the places, any of the components you've interacted with. And if there's no leaks present and everything looks good, then while the water is still running, switch it on. You should be good to go. That should take care of your garbage disposal installation. Now go get it taken care of.